Okay, good evening, everyone. This is Amy Sainange. I will call the special selectmen meeting to order Wednesday, December 15th, 2021. It is now 5:33 p.m. and all three selectmen are present. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so here in Town Hall, we have all three selectmen, Suzanne Wachowski, Ken Vosley, myself, Amy Sainange. I had also, during the course of all of this, appointed a few individuals from the public. Robert Ward, he is on the Board of Finance, Jamie Sinay, our fire marshal, and Justin Young, member of the public, also former member of the fire department, just to give us some additional, some additional views on where we go from here. Agenda item 3 is citizen comments. There are no other citizens here except for those I just mentioned. But the floor is open at this time for any citizen comments. You are welcome to unmute yourself, type in the chat box, raise your hand. But the floor is open for citizen comments. State your name and address if you'd like to speak. Anybody? This is the only citizen comments we have today. All right, hearing and seeing none, we will move forward with discussion on the ambulance service, discussion and possible action. I do want to note that we have Bob Holdsworth. He is the consultant that the town and town of Putnam hired to review the EMS system. And we also have Judy Reynolds from OEMS to answer any questions that this panel might have. So at this time, I am going to open up the floor to everybody here in the Sinay room.
For the members, for the people that have not heard the presentation and have not been, to every meeting can you just give a little bit of an update maybe on where we're at?
Do you want the update from Bob Holdsworth or
well, just that we received the study and.
Well, certainly. So for anybody who hasn't completely been following what has happened, what's transpired, we met with Bob Holdsworth last week. Oh, 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
Oh my goodness, I just lose track of time. Bob, what was it, last week or 2 weeks ago?
No, it was 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago already.
Yep.
And Bob had laid out 3 different models of direction that we could go. The first would be, well, actually just technically 2. 3.
Well, yeah.
Thompson would build their own standalone EMS service. Second option would be that we could go out to bid on contracting service. And the third option would be that Putnam would expand to take on Thompson's territory, the combined services. Bob, is there anything you'd like to add for those people who might not have been following?
No, I think that's correct. When the standalone service model, which in the report is option 1, that's everything from reconstituting community fire to starting a not-for-profit service of your own or bringing it on as a town department. All of those require need for service hearing at the state. Judy, I know Amy, you and Judy have had a conversation, and Judy and I had a conversation the other day concerning the state and the hearing process and all of the things that would need to go into this based on the way that community stepped out of the provision of EMS. So a need for service process is going to be part of anything that happens short of an RFP. So the standalone option There's a budget that's included in there for you. The only difference is if it's a reconstitution of community fire in some way, shape, or form, or a town EMS department. Obviously, capital equipment is already available because the 3 ambulances are there with the equipment in them. And so that decreases some of the costs as far as startup. Second option is the community, or that Putnam would expand their service, and that would be a matter of a decision from your body saying that's what you want, and then a meeting with Putnam's board to make sure that they are on board with how it's going to be funded, so that they are comfortable that they're going to be made whole in providing that service. Based on the conversation with Judy the other day, Putnam would need to go through a need for expanded service in order to bring on the number of ambulances and the territory. The PSA, which is the primary service area, has been relinquished by community, so that would need to be reapplied for by anybody, which could be concurrent with the hearing for need for expanded service. And Judy, if I misstated, please step in and correct me.
No, that would be the most efficient way to do it, and the way we generally handle it, with the need for service and having the PSA come in at the same time and all be awarded together.
And then the third option would be that you did not want Putnam to expand. You did not want to take it on by yourself in any way, whether it's supporting a community-based organization or having it as a town department. And that would be a matter of putting it out to RFP, developing the RFP, issuing it, scoring it, and assigning it to an ambulance provider. And that could be, the bidders on that would range from nobody, which has happened in a couple of places, where there has been no bid because of the demographics, the call volume, and the expense of carrying it forward and providing that service. And it would be, obviously, KB may bid on it. Putnam could in fact bid on it, although they have a capacity issue. Probably both have a capacity issue at this point. AMR could bid on it, and then the cost would be what it is. I firmly believe that an RFP, if you got bidders that were responsible, what we consider responsible, meaning that they had the capacity to do it, will be more expensive than what it is that we've proposed in the other two budgets, simply because covering 900 calls with a dedicated ambulance is just an expensive proposition. Even at the basic life support level, it's probably $400,000 or more to do that. And making sure that there's a profit margin in there to warrant doing it. So those are the three options that we presented. There's updated financials, which Amy, I know you have, I believe, right? So everybody's got the updated ones. There was a problem with the spreadsheet the other night when we did that. So there's a combined budget, which shows approximately $190,000 subsidy from each of the two towns to, if it was Putnam or whomever, as a combined service. And if you were to do it on a standalone basis, we're looking at probably 270, I think it's 277,000 to do it as a standalone service. And that's first year, and that's assuming that the billing revenue comes into play properly. So this is now about timeliness, who you want to be your provider, and how you want to provide service in town, and what's the most cost effective. I still have of the opinion that if you can negotiate with Putnam, that is the least expensive for both towns. If you want to be standalone, the least expensive option is trying to reconstitute something rather than starting from scratch. But again, that's up to you and your decision, and I can support you with however you choose to go forward.
So this is Amy St. Ange. Before we started the meeting, we were just chatting, Bob, and it seemed like maybe my timelines that I understood was off a little bit. Judy, could I pull you in just to clarify, if Thompson were to form a standalone, not reconstitute community, but form a standalone ambulance service, are we looking at 6 months minimum to form? And then what are we looking for if Putnam expands for time frame? And then if we were just to issue an RFP, I think we were shooting for a 3-month, or we thought a 3-month process for RFP.
Well, an RFP would depend on who you're contracting with. It would just be a matter of a contract. That could be a very short time period. For any need for service right now, optimistically, I would say 6 months. If no one objects. And it's just how long it takes, unfortunately. There's notification process. It'll go to hearing quickly. It's more about the hearing officer coming up with his summary in the end and finally awarding it. So I would say 6 months, yeah, or even longer at this point.
Even for Putnam to expand service.
Yeah, it's the same process either way. It's still a need for service. It's still a hearing, and it's still going to go through the same procedures.
So when we were talking earlier, Amy, I think when you and Judy spoke, the 45-day timeframe was to get the hearing done, or at least scheduled and then done. And then
With
after
no
that,
objections, right?
right, no objections. Then it's the work your way through all of the decision process. There's a 30-day built-in period for comment and complaint after the hearing is finally issued before it can go into effect. And if anybody objects along the way, that obviously extends that out further, going through it. So the 45-day part was getting the application, getting a hearing scheduled, and probably even holding the hearing. The rest of it is all the paperwork that goes into it and the legal part that goes behind it if there's no challenges.
Right.
The
The
3
hearing
month period
process is relatively quick, yeah.
The 3 month period that I put, time frame that I put on an RFP, the reason I put that on there is first we would need to meet to determine what your desires were as far as what you wanted to build the RFP around, and then issue it, give the ambulance providers that may wish to bid time to bid, then get the answers, get the replies and the bids back in, sit and meet and score them, choose a provider and a second place provider, and then negotiate the contract for service based on what it was issued in the RFP. And if anything happened along the way between, the lawyers not being available or negotiation issues or what have you, that adds to it. So that's why there's 90 days. It's build it, it's send it out, it's receive it, score it, and then finally put a contract in place with a startup time. So.
One more question. This is Amy St. Ange again. When you say someone might contest, who might contest?
Basically, anyone could. It could be a citizen that has concerns that whatever you're planning to do isn't going to serve the town well. It could be another commercial service that's going to say, why are we establishing a new one or expanding one when we have the capability to do it already? It doesn't mean it's going to go anywhere. They do that routinely in the bigger cities. I don't have a crystal ball, but I don't really see anyone objecting to whatever you decide to do. I could be wrong. I mean, there could be someone who does want it, but you're just not in a highly desirable area. And that's part of the problem. And like Bob said, it's hard to get people into an area that they're not going to make some sort of profit also on a commercial basis. It's just difficult. You don't have anything in your town that's attracted to them either. Do you have any large receiving facilities, any large retirement communities? What they're looking for, the commercials when they come in basically is, can we bolster our business by basing there and doing transfers also? It kind of helps them do that, which is what keeps them in the cities. So it's a matter of what your demographics are and what's attractive to them. But there's nothing stopping you from contracting for a short period of time and still moving forward, Bob, with trying to establish, just so you have a short term, maybe a year's contract, but you have a year to maybe go through that hearing process and put something in place. So you could kind of combine a few of those and, get your needs met short term, looking for a long-term solution. And whatever I can do to speed it along, help it out, nudge the hearing officers. I do it all the time. I don't know how effective I am, but I try. And I have a good relationship with most of them. And so it's just a matter of getting it done as quickly as possible, making sure the applications are clean, which is part of my job. If I get it as a draft, I can shoot it back with anything that might delay something. And most of these hearings for this sort of thing for a small town are relatively quick, unless you get an objection. Okay. And that's the big thing. You just don't know who might say, no, we don't think it's a good idea.
All right. Thank you, Judy. Open up the floor to anybody else here in the Cine room.
Justin Young, Amy, I think if I remember right from our meeting, the one potential additional time frame thing for with Thompson EMS would be if we did have to form that nonprofit, it's getting through the 501c3 process with the IRS.
Yes.
Right.
And that has, it's register the business with the Secretary of State and its requisite requirements. Then it's filed with the IRS paperwork to get the nonprofit status. And then it's filed the need for service with the application, because you would need to have that organization established and the tax exemption in order to go for the application as a certified service.
And if it went as a sorry, Susan,
Nope.
if it went as a municipal, then we wouldn't have to go through that IRS piece. We would just go through the need for service, correct?
You would go through the need
So-
for service, and part of your option would be showing the ordinance or the action at the first Board of Selectmen level, approving and establishing the new department and having the budget line item and the funding available to do it based on the budget that we would have to present in the need for service. You have to have 6 months of operating revenue and the resources. Some
So
of your
Bob,
expenses would,
You are correct about that, though. It cannot be a town entity. It has to be a department of the town. The town can't own a PSA, but the department can. So how you set that up does matter.
I think Justin was just saying town-owned
Right.
organization, but yes, the proposal was to make it as a town department
Perfect.
if they went that way. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both.
That was Justin at,
Yeah. And make sure you, just because that mic has to pick up, make sure you project really well, guys. Is everybody hearing us well in the virtual audience?
Yep.
Okay.
James Ney. Bob, one question with the temporary. We talked about the 1 year getting started if we needed to have time to do a temporary contract. How long of a time would it take, say if Putnam EMS needed to get a third ambulance, and while we were doing the paperwork to do the 6 month to actually do the PSA agreement, how long would it take them to get that third ambulance for a need based on prior to the PSA actually being transferred over? So
Well,
if temporary coverage, if that was the option we went to and we said Putnam was going to do temporary coverage until everything is sorted out and they actually are awarded the PSA, would they be able to get a need for service license for a third ambulance in a fairly quick time frame to have that third ambulance available?
There's two parts to your question there that need to be addressed. First one is applying for the third permit and then having basically a mutual aid coverage contract in place. I believe the application for the third permit is either about to be or has been filed. And Judy, correct me if I'm wrong, we talked about that being with no objection about a 45-day process.
that's
on the
relatively
short form.
If they haven't had a new vehicle within the last 3 years, an additional vehicle, it's a short form. And it's as quickly as I can put it through and I can get a recommendation letter from the council, which I don't see as a problem. I've already talked to Maria about that. That would go through very quickly. So it could even be a little less than 45 if everything goes well.
Okay. So then negotiate, and then the part that goes from there would be the need for service application. If you decided that you wanted them to be the permanent one, then there's the need for service application with letters of support from both towns, et cetera, that goes through, and that starts that process. So it's two different pieces. One is the coverage contract, and then the other one is, kind of a permanency to it. And the need for service going forward to cover the town and the vehicles that would go with that would be part of that process. And at the same time would be an application, again, endorsed by your community to assign the PSA once that, as part of it. Two separate applications, but running concurrently so that the hearing officer sees them both. And in theory would take action on them both and say, yes, we have awarded the expansion of service. Yes, we have awarded the PSA. They would not do one without the other. If you didn't get the expansion of service and it was contested, they wouldn't assign the PSA because you wouldn't have the capacity. You wouldn't want them to assign the PSA because you wouldn't have the capacity to do it with only one extra ambulance in the long term.
So there is one safety valve for the town of Thompson. Without a letter of endorsement from the first select person, they won't get anything. So even if somebody objects, they're not necessarily going to be able to get the PSA or the territory unless the first select person decides this is what I want. So that's kind of a little safety valve for the town that they get to choose, because by that endorsement, that's what'll push it through the hearing. If there's no endorsement, they won't even hear it.
With Putnam EMS only having 2 ambulances, are there any requirements or restraints from them to bring one of their ambulances to Thompson? Do they have to keep them both in Putnam, or are they just bound to have one crew available? For their-
Bob is correct. They can do that on a mutual aid right now. You guys can have a little temporary agreement going, at least for the short term, to help you out during this time. And our department encourages services joining together, because right now there's staffing issues, there's cost issues, and we find that's a much more viable model when towns do join together. So I don't see any objection on our part. I see that almost as them wanting to push that sort of thing through.
I can tell you, however, that the conversation I've had with Putnam Board, and I know it's full disclosure in all the meetings that we've talked about that, is until that third permit comes through, they won't have capacity to do it and then have a maintenance spare available because of their own needs. So it would be a matter of everybody kind of supporting the need for that third truck. And then that could start immediately upon that, and Tammy can start going through the hiring process if that's, to make sure she's got enough staff, and she's actually started doing that. But they won't have capacity because they routinely need both of their trucks and they need to maintain them, which means they need to take one down, and they can't leave their own PSA uncovered because they're over with you. So we're looking at 30 to 45 days before the capacity exists.
In your report, Bob, you specified that they were the need, that was where the need for the peak crew was, because of that, at peak hours.
Correct,
In Putnam.
correct.
I was just going to add, this was one of my questions, was around, this is Rob Werge of, sorry for not introducing myself. First up, great job, Bob, on the report. I missed the report out 2 weeks ago, but I got a chance to read it in its entirety, and I think it was laid out very clearly and very well.
Thank you.
While we're talking about a potential interim solution, if the equipment is available, is that the 45 days? Just want to make sure I'm clear. Like the 45 days is to get the appropriate resources in place and the appropriate and the PSA in place.
The trucks exist because you bought them. So the trucks are there. There's ways to do things. The issue is nobody has the authority to use them right now. So they're there, but nobody can use them until either Putnam's expansion is, or the third truck authority is granted, or short of a resurgence of a community fire, which still has authority to use those vehicles, does not have a PSA because they gave it up. So it presents another legal issue that needs to go to this, would have to go to the state. Any way you shake it, we're 30 days away from being able to do much of anything. Other than back up the town or back up KB if KB doesn't have resources, which is the general mutual aid. But any permanent guaranteed solution other than what you currently have is going to be as fast as that application can be approved up at the state to allow a third vehicle to go into service.
And also, thank you for that. And to clarify on the options, the option 2, we're calling it, I've heard it referred to as Putnam expanding.
Mhm.
That's really not a different framework of option 3. It's not an outsource model for the town of Thompson. When we say Putnam expanding, we're really talking about a combined model or a regional model, if you will.
Mhm.
The way I
Oh, I wanted to
understood it, it was
clarify
more of a contract. We would be contracting with Putnam to provide the service, and we would have one board member on their board to represent the town of Thompson.
That's not entirely how I understood it. That's why.
That's
That's-
more what I was understanding.
That's the proposed version, and the conversation was whether 1 board seat versus 2 board seats or whatever. The biggest issue is the difference, the major differences between option 1 of having a standalone service for just Thompson. All of the expenses, all of the brunt of everything is on each of the services, each of the towns to do their own thing, versus sharing the cost with one joint service that's providing it. You don't have, if you end up with Putnam as your provider, or any outsourced provider, the reality is You don't need to have insurance. You don't need to have workers' comp. There's a lot of things that you don't have that are duplicated when both towns are operating an independent organization. Under a shared service, those things are not there, which bring the cost down, which is why it's a more cost-effective way to share resources if you can do it. And then you contractually obligate each other to how you're going to provide it, how it's going to be funded, and what happens if somebody wants to walk away down the road, which is what we talked about in the meeting of having a good prenup, as somebody said in the meeting, to be able to separate it again, but it still opens the same door. You're either going to pull it back and you're going to put it out and have the state then either authorize a new service, if that's what you decided to do a year down the road, 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road. Or you're going to contract out for service and back out of a shared agreement and a shared contract.
So just a point to make. If you do merge with Putnam in some form and they attain the PSA for Thompson, it will take an alternative provision and you will have to go back to a hearing to remove them.
Mhm.
So no contract that you break or anything else will matter to us. They will still be the authorized provider under that PSA. And the purpose of that is so that we don't have towns changing providers every other year. And it's just not very encouraging to building a good service if somebody doesn't know they're going to be there next year.
Mhm.
So once they have the PSA, it's theirs until you can prove for whatever reason, it's not an advantageous thing for your town and you want to change.
If I could, just so it's clear, I get the sharing or the leveraging of fixed costs, right? It makes, as long as you have capacity, it makes more sense to leverage those fixed costs over more volume or more area. To your same point, Judy, about the private sectors wanting to utilize different geographies, some are more attractive because they're looking at it on a business model basis. Here, to me, it feels that the shared model, it really is different than just option 3 where we're outsourced. It's not a real outsource model to Putnam. It's a shared model where there's joint, the governance is shared, there's joint ownership on the board itself. You know, both towns are kind of in this as a team, right? To provide these services. It's not, it feels different than a contract per se, where you're a third party is providing a service and you're paying for it on a fee for service model. Am I right on that, Bob and Judy, or is that really what it is? And we're not calling it that.
No, you're right in that there's a whole lot more involvement from both towns rather than just writing a contract and making sure the contract's adhered to, because you do have a seat on the board. You are going forward and obligating each other to funding this service for the mutual benefit of both parties. It is Putnam EMS providing, or under that scenario would be Putnam EMS providing that service. So you have outsourced the shared services to an organization, but you have a seat on the board and you do have involvement in the governance of it. So you get to see the budget. You don't just get an annual stipend request. You get to have a say in how it's operated. So that is the biggest difference.
The way that Putnam does, right? I mean, it's no different. EMS is providing that same service to Putnam. It would be the same way, but it's providing it now to Putnam and an expanded area to include Thompson.
So Bob, I think, Ken, did you have something to say?
Bob, how is this is Ken Bosley. Bob, how is the relationship where we have if we did combine, we'd have a C? How does that work with Putnam currently on their board? What representation does the town have to Putnam EMS? Do you know?
I can't speak to that, and I don't know if anybody from Putnam is on. I don't know if Putnam, the town, actually has a seat on their board, or if they just make a budget request, and they've been more involved lately because of the change in direction at the town and who's up there. I don't know if they actually have a seat on the board or have requested it, because I know if they have requested it, it would have been granted to them, but I can't speak to that.
So basically, they're contracting out.
Right now they are. And they've worked very well together with the town and the town departments and things like that. I don't know if there's actually a seat on the board, although it's been discussed. I can't tell you that with the bylaws were changed to do that.
And Bob, this is Amy St. Ange. You're not sure of the number of people that sit on that board, or do you know that?
I believe their board is currently 7, if memory serves. Ed can tell you flat out. I just don't have that in front of me.
So Justin Young again, I think, and Bob, I think the report was very comprehensive. I echo what Rob Word said. My concerns from a shared model standpoint would be that there would, at one person on the board, that there would not be enough representation from Thompson. So that I would suggest or request that there be, if we do go down that route, that there be at least a minority on the board in representation of the town of Thompson on it. That's my first comment. My second comment is on the overall shared model at 191,000 is the new number. 190. At 190,000. I think my question there, Bob, would be on a revenue basis, it looked like 37.8, 37.9% of the calls, then that being the 900 were from Thompson, 1,500 from Putnam. It seems like Thompson would be paying part of the Putnam dollar amount. Would you at all be opposed to a percentage split, or would you see that being a problem?
I don't know that it's not my call to make. It's your call and Putnam's board to make. The discussion that would come back, I think, from Putnam's side, and I'm not speaking for them, but in talking through your question, if you're going to go into it as a shared model and you're going to go into it with that, putting up that peak truck to cover both towns, could you negotiate, a different split? Certainly. That everything is negotiable. It's certainly a discussion point. The other part of what you talked about as far as seat on the board, when I wrote the report and proposed one, the 2 members of the Putnam board that were there that night said at least one. So I don't think that's even a problem from a discussion point. How the finances work, I wanted to give you kind of an easy way to compare what the cost would be. I didn't want to get into the weeds with percentages and things like that, because that's for you guys to discuss. I mean, I'm happy to lead that discussion, but it's something for you guys to talk about and at least put on the table for them to digest and see if Putnam is amenable to that, because all 3 of you, 3 organizations here under that model are going to work together. So it's going to be, what is best for all 3 combined.
I think, sorry, Rob, I think what Bob just said is the nuance of the difference, to me, is the nuance of the difference between the contract model and this kind of collaborative model, because we're going to work together on what that budget looks like. When are we going to replace assets? But in the end, the 2 towns are going to help fund part of that. Mm-hmm. On a pure outsource model, there's a profit piece driven through the entity that's a for-profit entity. You're contracting with them, aligned contract in a sense. You're going to pay, the town will pay X amount, and that's how the contract reads. Here, it feels more like an expansion of our historical model that we had. We're doing it combined with another town, whereby we're now leveraging more activity, more call volume. We're kind of utilizing those assets to a higher capacity.
I think I see it, Justin Young again. I think I see it more as a partnership versus just a fee for service. Kind of like the situation we're in right now is a fee for service model, right? We're paying, and regardless of the revenue, we're paying the dollar amount. With the shared service model, as Bob has proposed it, the revenue counts towards and I say the revenue, right? The billing income counts towards the annual stipend that we would propose regardless. And I also think that when you have a contracted model, the contract is between the town and that contracted service. So Amy and whatever service that would be. This model gives it a little bit more say in it being 1, 2, or 3 members on that board actually having a minority or majority right to have a say in what happens. Of course, based on what the townspeople of Thompson want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think one thing to stress with this too is with that peak truck time frame, it actually gives us more coverage at a higher level. So we have that 3 ambulances available more often than just one dedicated ambulance and that's it.
And Putnam too, both towns.
Well, there we go.
Even though the need is stronger in Putnam, we got a 1 hour peak time in Thompson. The majority would be, they're figuring for Putnam, so, but it would be available if the second call comes out. You know,
You guys-
when they're both out.
You guys both have the same 8 to 8 timeframe where that's the highest call volume in the town. The other part of that is when we looked at the unit hour utilization, there were a couple of hours. Yours is one. You have about a 3 hour window, and they've got about a 5 hour window where it's already reaching past capacity and into mutual aid. So it's more than an hour, but you're both getting the benefit of that truck, stationed as needed. So the other thing to remember about all of this, besides the obvious fixed costs, the insurances and those types of things, we're talking about replacing vehicles, but not having to do the capital purchases that you've all done in the past of saving up and buying a $180,000 ambulance. We're talking about leasing the ambulances, which allows you to keep your capital in reserve for both of you. And that's what a number of the towns are doing with everything from snowplows to fire trucks. So it's not a foreign concept. The biggest part of this, the biggest expense you have in the line item is labor. And if you end up with 2 separate services plus the other services that are already up in that region, you are all competing, and you're going to end up in a salary war at some point, because there are just not enough people to staff the needs of multiple services. And especially if you, as the smaller of the 2 towns, are trying to compete with the larger of the 2 towns, there's more revenue that can come in to one versus the other. By sharing it, you have a bigger pool, and it just makes the labor market piece of this easier to manage. Not easy, but easier. So.
Suzanne, I know you wanted to say
Yes,
something.
I have a question. In your model that you've put together, I'm seeing non-labor costs, I'm seeing labor costs, but something I'm not seeing is benefits.
Exactly what I was
Correct.
gonna ask.
Is
We
that
talked
gonna
about
be?
We talked about that in the meeting, about my going back and discussing and putting benefit costs in based on the model. Because Thompson, however you choose to do it, if you're a standalone, if it's a town department, if it's an independent corporation, are going to drive the rates differently. Putnam currently buys its benefits through the town, from the town, which is a very common way of doing it for nonprofit services in town. So we can build that in. But the other part of it is you have 3 things. You have how many people are going to be eligible for benefits. You're going to do, what is your benefit stratosphere going to be? Are you going to pay 100% out of the box? Are you going to pay 50% the first year, 75 the second, 100% the third? You're going to pay for families. So as we get closer into this, we'll refine the budget based on what you guys both agree to. And then we'll know how we're buying those benefits, and I can put that number in.
Bob, do you know how, because that was going to be my question, because I didn't see the benefits listed. First question, how Putnam currently handles that? I mean, you said they pay through the town. How would it work with with us merging together? Would we only pay for the staff that was working in
So we would
Thompson?
still pay for it. That was my question.
Right. I'm assuming, like, would the staff members that were working in Thompson get covered underneath the Thompson health insurance plan, et cetera?
I don't think that makes sense.
Would that just become part of that flat cost that we
Yes.
pay? Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yes.
This is similar to what we did when we combined the billing official
Okay.
between Thompson and Putnam.
Okay.
We covered the benefits. They paid a certain amount
Oh.
to cover that.
Oh, okay.
So if we were to create our own department, Thompson EMS, say, then would they be able to purchase or acquire the insurance through the town?
Well, they would have.
They could.
Putnam's
Yeah.
correct.
And so we're talking the same 6 month, it would take 6 months to create our own department and service. And it would take approximately 6 months to create this model with Putnam, timeframe wise. Is that what I was hearing? Because I had taken.
I believe you may be correct, but getting I think you said, what was it, about 45 days to get that extra vehicle on and contract with them to do what we're doing with KB at the moment.
Okay.
We would just shift it over to Putnam
Under the new
if
model.
we were working towards a combined model.
Something that you had said at the last meeting I was at, Bob, was something about transferring vehicles over. So would we be surrendering the vehicles that we have purchased to Putnam?
Under the final shared model, if that were the case, once the need for expansion service were to go through and the authorities for those vehicles were then available, then yes, part of the contribution, at least from my perspective, part of the contribution for the first year that Thompson would make would be evaluation of the equipment that was being put into the system. Whether all three went into the system, I can't speak to that because I have not personally inspected all three of the ambulances to know whether that's something that I know two of them were frontline, a third was a spare. I don't know if that third one counts or whether the Putnam vehicle that they're currently trying to acquire would be the third. So they would have three, you would have two, to be worked out. Whether that other vehicle becomes something else.
But we would put a value on that as part of finalizing this package, if we
Yes.
went in that direction.
That's correct.
I
Same
think
thing that
there-
happens if you were to have a 501c3 corporation formed and you were to support that model. At some point in time, part of that is going to be a transfer of those assets to them for some value. If it's a town department that you're going to create, you already own them. So those vehicles go somewhere with a value attached to them as part of a need for service application, because it shows that you have acquired this, so you don't, the budget and the 6-month financing need is going to be a little bit less because you don't have capital purchases, you already made them.
So, yeah, there's a value assignment. I don't necessarily believe that means there's any compensation returned to the town.
Well, I would think towards the contribution, there may be, the initial contribution.
That's correct. Well,
Right.
initial contribution.
Let's throw a number at it. Let's say that those two vehicles, I don't know what you paid for.
Real quick, just I wanted to clarify, I wanted to clarify something that Ken said. You're saying the contribution in terms of the 190 per year to get started?
Well, you look, that's what we're looking, based on this without benefits and everything, it's 190. And
Right.
we just talked about what Justin had mentioned, based on, you could put a value just on the number of calls and your contribution could, be a 60, 2/3, 1/3, however that could work. I mean, that's open to discussion, but if we're putting in, we would be putting in, say, 2 out of the 3 ambulances, if they're trying to get one, would seem to be the more practical, because the 2 are the newer ones. So if they're worth I'm just throw a number, $100,000, it's $100,000. Whether that's broken out over 2 or 3 years in this contribution or whatever, I'm sure that there would be some compensation somewhere.
And I only wanted to return back to it, Ken, because I thought that was what we were thinking. And I'm not going to speak for Putnam either, but if I'm Putnam, they're entering into the agreement and into the partnership. They already have a set of assets. So for us to, and then to expand the territory, they need more assets to do that. So it's all kind of to be determined, but I could see a model where there's 2 or 3 assets there. We need to bring kind of the price of entry
Assets, we got
to get started, versus it being a credit.
Yeah,
I don't
and the model
know.
says it needs 5 to operate efficiently.
Right. So if we join forces with them and they already have assets, there's some balancing of, provides the incremental assets on day one.
Yep.
Versus a credit toward it. I don't know.
I
Ken.
don't, it's a question. Bob, has anybody gone into shared services and done what we may possibly combine? That you're aware of?
There have been acquisitions, there have been commercial companies that have merged together, there have been purchases. There's always a value placed on the rolling stock as an asset as part of it. To my knowledge, there has not been this level with the complicatedness of it, especially with the way the community extracted itself from the service. It adds a layer of complication from what would be a simple need for service and acquisition. And in the report, I talked about the fact that there would need to be some value. I don't know what you paid for the 3 ambulances. I don't know what the appraisal of those vehicles, I don't know the mileage. I know one of them is relatively new, one of them is medium age, and one of them is end of life almost, if memory serves correctly. So realistically, we're probably talking about 2 vehicles that would go there. We assign a value based on what you paid for them and have somebody independent take a look at them and see if that actually is, fair market value, and then negotiate. The biggest thing for all of you to think about from the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance model perspective is, how do you want to provide service in your town? What makes you comfortable and what can you live with going forward? Because we can go down a multitude of rabbit holes trying to figure out the nuances of each one, as opposed to the overall concept of how do we want to do this? And then we can get deep into it with how are we going to provide benefits? What are we going to do with rolling stock we purchased and equipment we purchased? But I would urge you to think through, everything else is negotiable and workable. You have a benchmark of about what it's going to cost. We can argue different pieces and we can look at ways to share things, and we can look at in-kind services and buildings that are available that don't require rent, all of those types of things that we can look at. It's most important from where I am to be able to help you is for you to decide which model kind of makes sense. And then we drive deep into that one.
So Bob, just as a point of reference, Morris and Litchfield had very similar situation where the ambulance ended suddenly with the fire department and then Litchfield absorbed it. I don't know a lot of those particulars because that is not my region, the one region I don't have. But they may be open to having a conversation with you as to how they folded that all together. And it's working quite well with Litchfield covering both. So it's a very, very similar situation of a sudden stop and how they took over and helped out in the short term and the long term.
You're right, I forgot about them.
Judy, what was the name of the other? It was Litchfield. and-
Litchfield is the
Morris.
current provider and Morris was the town that basically shut down overnight, just like yours.
Because Morris Fire Department was 1 ambulance.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the cap.
So I don't know if that would help as a resource to just speak to them about maybe some of the challenges they had and how they solved it.
No, absolutely.
So I think that was a very good question, is what type of service are we comfortable with in the town of Thompson? I have actually met with a lot of the EMS individuals from Thompson who still stay in touch and are very strong. And they have come up with almost their own model of stability that they are that they would like to move forward with in this sense. One of the problems I'm hearing is employees and finding staff. And they have something like 4 trainers, am I correct? Or 3 or 4 that can actually train EMS, run the EMT classes and certify and recertify in this town. They want to work with the school system to create at early levels EMRs and then EMTs to be able to have staffing. And what I'm hearing from Putnam, from Tammy, is that staffing is an issue and not having staffing. The EMTs that I've met with here in Thompson also want to have babysitter classes. They want to be able to offer flu clinics. They want to be able to expand their services to help sustain and generate more income in this town. They have discussed, a model that they kind of have formed in their heads of what some of the things that they have been doing. When we make this decision, we have to really think about the service we want in this town and what we want that to look like. Because if we do contract with Putnam, we become Putnam EMS. We are no longer, and that would be something that would be very difficult to come back from. We bought 3 buses or 3 trucks, and we are putting in a safety building, creating a new complex. And
No matter what, we need the complex.
yes, no.
Whatever
What
option
I'm
we
saying
choose, we
is
need the
we
complex.
have 2 major components. And I know that it's 190,000 that we're talking about having to contribute to this on a yearly basis. But I wonder if that is something that is as realistic as it looks. And what we could do to really come up with a model to have a Thompson. I'm strongly in favor of keeping this in town. I'll make that known. I think that we can sustain it. I think we can build on it. And I think that we have a good crew that would come on board and be able to facilitate it.
I'll just speak on that. Just like anything, I mean, I follow nationwide and regionalization is the way to go. Each town having their own services is failing everywhere. And if we create our own service, we're not going to be able to pay them the amount of money that is listed here on what they're going to pay for quality EMTs. We're not going to be able to do it. I mean, we're already at $277,000. You know, you add benefits to that. I mean, where does that shoot that up to? You know, well over, you know, probably $350,000. I'm guessing the town share. And now not included in that budget, you have to add in that the building. And then finding people. I mean, we have a core group of people, but what happens when those people in town move on, find different jobs,
But
find
that's
different
just what I
careers?
was saying, is they are working with the school and they want to create a program where
But that
they are
doesn't-
training EMTs.
But those
Because
people
there's
move
nobody
on.
in this.
I've seen this historically,
Yes,
those
but
people
there's
move on.
nobody in northeastern Connecticut doing that, but you're gonna run into that if you're in Putnam, they're gonna move on. They're gonna grow out of it, they're gonna move on to
But-
something else.
I don't think an independent model is practical. The town would have to, now you have to go through the process of, you know, who's gonna do the hiring, who's gonna provide human resources, who's gonna provide equipment maintenance, who's gonna provide, there's a lot of things that when you go into an organization, either you do a shared organization like we're doing with, we could do a Putnam or a contracting out for an RFP with KB or another service. You know, a lot of that stuff is already done, you know, and I foresee if we created our own model, we're well over a year on getting it up and running functionally properly to where we need to be. And, you know, who's gonna do the hiring? Who's gonna do the management aspect of it? Who's gonna do those human
Well-
resources? And who's gonna run it? Is
Who's
it gonna be a
gonna do it
town
now?
agency?
We're gonna rely on Putnam's administration to do all the hiring.
With seats on the board. No, with seats on the
With
board.
one seat on the board, we're not gonna
We
have
will
the same,
have
that's
more
the
than-
other thing,
We
the
will
other
have more than
concern.
one seat. We
The
will
other
have more than
concern
one
I
seat.
have is we lose total control. We don't lose total control, but we do
But you're
lose a
kingdom
lot of
minded,
control.
you're not community minded. You're being kingdom minded. This is our Thompson's kingdom, and that's what
No, what
will
I'm
make
saying
us
is I think
fail.
we can do it
But
better.
we can still take those ideas that are out there and implement them and be advocates for them and work to, what I walked away from the meeting 2 weeks ago, hard to believe, was that Putnam needs us as much as we need Putnam. We need each other to survive. We really do. And when I did my pros and cons, there were no pros for standing alone, except for the fact that we could say that we're Thompson EMS. And that's just not the right thinking. We need to work together.
I'm not going to agree with that.
Well, I know that you're not going to agree with
No,
that.
I'm not, and I get what you're saying, regionalization is, but maybe this isn't the right model for
But
us.
here's the thing, is if the EMTs in Thompson are about serving the town of Thompson and not personal vested interest, if they say, I want to serve the town of Thompson, hey, I'm going to work for Putnam EMS, what's stopping them from going to the school and doing training?
Right.
As
But
part of
that's-
Putnam EMS,
but
nothing
they-
stops
but I
them.
think it's-
Nothing stops them
And
from
they
going,
can-
doing daycares in town. Nothing stops them from doing anything in town. Just because it says Putnam
And
EMS
we
on
would
it,
advocate.
doesn't stop them from doing all these functions, does it?
What I'm saying to you is, they had a strong vision that they wanted to be able to create this model, to come up with ideas to sustain it, to be able to make it a very strong model that in the state people would look at and say, look at what we have done here, to be able to serve the town of Thompson.
The study that Bob did back in 18 with NECOG, the going forward, and if anybody has read it, is regionalization and sharing of services is going to be the long-term goal because of the cost of the standalone, the ruralness, the amount of calls in order to get this all done, the costs are prohibitive. And it's trying to get staff because we're fighting with everybody. So it wasn't going to happen today or tomorrow, as we had discussed a few years ago, but it's leading that way, and the trend is going that way. I would think going with a combined service and sharing is the way to go. Doesn't mean being on the board and that we can't say, hey, we'd like to see if we can offer some different programs with some of our people and do different things. That can always be done. But everybody's fighting. As a matter of fact, Woodstock themselves, it should be actually a 3-town combined service between Woodstock, Thompson, and Putnam to get this all done because of the costs that are going on. And Woodstock's, what do you call? Correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, they hire a staffing company for them for the EMTs, I believe.
I believe they do have a staffing company. I'm not sure which of the two it is.
Right, Woodstock for Woodstock Ambulance, and they're contributing 150,000 just from the town now, and they're struggling to make it.
So the comment that you made about the crew being interested in training.
They haven't done that in years.
I'm sorry, what was that?
They used to use Vintech. They haven't used Vintech in years. They have a staff administrator who hires and fires as necessary and manages the service with the direction of the board of directors.
Thank you, Josh.
And they just posted for hiring EMTs at a rate almost $4 less than what this proposal is.
The other part,
Sorry, Bob, just quickly to build off of what Jamie Sine just said. My feeling is we need to, if we can pay the staff appropriately, what they're worth. And honestly, in my mind, $19 an hour isn't what they're worth. Give them good benefits though, that will help offset. If we can do that, we want to be advocates for them and we want to be able to pay accordingly for the work and the knowledge that they have. I pay my staff members more than $19 an hour and they don't have nearly the knowledge. They're just serving and serving at weddings. So it's important to take care of these staff members and I just feel strongly that the combined service would allow us to do that.
I
This is
would
Rob.
agree with
I
that.
was going to add that I absolutely hear where Suzanne's coming from. And I'd be aligned with the model of us having it as a standalone. If the scale made sense, if the economics behind it made sense where we could absorb those costs and there was enough revenue coming in that the whole model was, for lack of a better term, not so far underwater. It really feels like a situation, because at that point, we would have the ultimate control. We would have the say as a town in terms of what we want to do 100%. The other extreme, the other bookend is that we outsource it all. We pay a higher bill and it's peace of mind. It's somebody else's problem. But that comes at a high price tag and we have little to zero control over the type of assets and the people, and you kind of get what you contract for. So this feels like kind of a middle space where we could still do a lot of those things you say, you're bringing up, Suzanne. It's just, we need to do it in partnership. We need to collaborate with another town. I don't feel, at least it doesn't feel to me in the conversations and meetings I've had, that this is going to be a Putnam's model with a Thompson kind of tagged onto it as a sub model. I think they're going to take us in as a true partner and even possibly change the name if that's that meaningful. I mean, there's a lot of things that can be done. And maybe get the best of both worlds. Get some of the things that you're asking for, Suzanne, but do it in a way where the economics and those fixed costs are spread out over many, many more calls that can help pay for those fixed costs.
And interesting to note, I mean, we've been talking in town for the last 2 years about combining of services. And when we hired our human resources director, there were people here at town hall that were like, oh, we're going to be the stepchild. School's going to get all the services from the HR director and we're going to get nothing. So I'm just saying, I think that there is strength in numbers and there's strength in working together. And on another note, there was a chat, and even though we're beyond citizen comments, I think it's important to include anybody who's in this meeting tonight it was Brian Erickson. Let me see. Is it possible to have Putnam and Thompson combined as a whole new total service with new management, which is, well, let me just keep reading it. With new management, a new board, and a business name, as opposed to running under Putnam as they stand. That way, control would be even. Is there any, how would you address that, Bob?
That goes to the whole, Bob, the way I understand it, that would go to the same new service. So we're looking at 6 months, 501c3. We're looking at all of those. Right. At a minimum.
That's a year.
Right. Right. And then
Is it-
absorbing Putnam's PSA, or, having Putnam agree to giving their PSA to this new entity, Thompson agreeing to give their PSA to the new entity. In the meantime, we're paying the contracted service, be it KB for a year, be it whoever, this RFP, because either way, in that case, we'd have to go to RFP for a minimum of 12 months. Because you'd need some service in town while this other piece got formed. Now, there's nothing to say, correct me if I'm wrong, there's nothing to say that if we did go with the shared model, going Thompson going on to the Putnam model, that this couldn't happen in the long term, that the board be expanded to absorb a greater majority from Thompson as its members, to absorb Putnam/Thompson EMS, or maybe eventually Woodstock were to jump on board and it becomes Northeast Connecticut EMS. Whatever that may be long term, I think we need to look beyond 12 months here, and we need to look at what it's going to be 18, 24, 36 months down the road, from both a financial perspective and from a service to the town perspective. I agree with Suzanne when she says that there is a core group of EMS providers that are with the town, that were united in their efforts. They are still united in their efforts, and there's a lot of respect to be given to that. I understand that there are some concerns, and hopefully those concerns can be addressed with whatever model the town goes with and chooses, and they can be included in that piece of the process moving forward.
And I think this was still Brian. He said, that's fine, as long as it means a better option for the long run. And I was thinking the same way as you, Justin, that in the future, as maybe we're contracted with, we're not contracted, but we merge with Putnam. In the future, we could build a bigger, better service with a different name, potentially, while we're still operating.
I know Judy said that, even though there's a contract that the PSA holder still holds, it has to prove different to get that away from them.
Right.
But there's nothing binding that says the town of Thompson has to pay Putnam EMS if they decide they don't want to pay anymore. So the PSA owner holds it, but our call volume isn't enough to sustain them operating in Thompson without supplemental income from the town. So they wouldn't want to hold that PSA, and they would withdraw the town anyway.
That's
Is
your
that,
balance. Yep, that's your balance. The town almost always has the leverage of providing some form of funding, and if they cut that funding, you're right, you do have that control at least.
Well, and so I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think part of the hangup here, which is part of the hangup that we've all talked about, is not adequate representation on the Putnam board. Now, Bob had said that his suggestion in the report was one person. They're a board of 7 right now. There's nothing that says that they can't go to a board of 9 where 4 members, where it says in the bylaws going forward with a bylaw amendment that there are a minimum of 4 members from Thompson, and that it can shift majority minority depending on what's going on. I think it's appropriate that Putnam have the majority, since their call volume is currently the majority. But I also don't think that it gets into a Putnam versus Thompson discussion. I think it's at that point, at least at a board level for me, the discussion would be what's best for the region, not what's best for Thompson, not what's best for Putnam, but what's best for the region. Of course, whoever's on the board is going to have a bias towards their town, but they're also going to have to think what's best for the region.
From what I understand, Pomfret used to be combined with Putnam. They were sort of what we're looking at and talking about. Why did they separate?
They were with Putnam, and then they were with Mortlake, and then they went to KB. They just
What, do we know why?
They've never had, Putnam Pomfret ambulance was years and years and Pomfret didn't have people. And then they just merged away from Putnam to go to a different service from Mortlake.
It was staffing and everything because of,
Yeah.
that was always the problem. Big area, small.
So I'm curious
Amount of
as to why we're not
population.
looking to, or to get an idea what it would look like if we combined with, do they contract with KB? Is that how they do it?
Pomfret has a contract, Pomfret, Hampton, and
They're
Eastford
contracted.
has a contract with KB.
They're
Each town pays a share into the, whatever that set amount is. It's a
Their
contract,
call-
that's
Their
it.
call volume is pretty low there,
Pretty
Very
low.
low.
from what I
For the
understood.
three towns.
And I understood that from Randy Daggett
It's
long
RFP
time
or is
ago.
it a combined contract?
In my understanding is it's a combined contract, but it's essentially an RFP. The three towns have put out an RFP to KB and said, hey, will you provide us the service? KB has said, yes, we'll provide you the service. Here's our dollar amount. And whether it makes or breaks KB, whether KB can fiscally support it that year or not based on the call volume, KB takes whatever KB takes. And I don't want to speak for KB, but that's, I mean, from any business perspective, that's the way I would understand it, right? You have the call volume in the three towns, you're going to pay for the ambulance in the three towns. If you don't, you're not.
And their call volume doesn't sustain paying for the people out there for the three towns. So the town's share has to go up. And that's why it's a three town.
The share goes up and that's why the paramedic intercept is very valuable to them.
So said differently, if they didn't do it together as three towns and they contracted as each individual town,
It'd
the
be-
combined cost would be far more than
Okay, yeah.
than the current cost.
And I'd like to explore the combined.
Yeah.
Moving forward.
I would not. And I'm gonna be a little more blunt than I wanted to be. I have heard that the administration at the Putnam EMS is not as strong as, and they've had some situations and some concerns, and that has to do with part of them not being able to staff. What guarantee do we have that we won't have the same situation that we were in with community, or that the staffing was in with the community with this situation?
Oversight of board representation.
That and the
We
fact that
didn't
you're
have
paying them.
oversight before.
Yeah.
If you don't pay them,
You have to
get it
pay
back.
the
Did
right
not have
salary.
anything to do with money. And that's the same with what you're
But that's-
saying we're gonna have board representation, but if we're the minority on the board, then do we truly? Will we have our own administration here in Thompson, and will they have administration in Putnam, or will it be one combined administrator? How will we be able to guarantee we won't get into a situation that we were in,
any
given the
insight, Bob?
information that we know?
The
Bob,
bottom
get
line
any
is,
insight?
if you have a board that is shared, and you have a combined, you have a service area, you have, fiscal participation, board participation at whatever level, you guys ultimately negotiate, you do in fact have the ability to, oversee what's going on and participate in what's going on. There's a lot of things that change over time. Community served for years, then whatever transpired up there transpired, and suddenly there was no service. The folks that were involved in that, very good EMTs, want to get back together in some way, shape, or form, are proposing to train people at the high school, assuming that those people that want to be trained. There are a lot of ambulance companies around the country that are running programs that are train you, and if you successfully complete the program, they'll hire you. That is going on in multiple states right now. As a shared service, you now have those same trainers that now would have the ability to create a program and train at 2 high schools. To be able to provide stop the bleed in 2 communities, to be able to provide CPR and babysitter in 2 communities. So you now have the
That
ability to
assumes that
have
those
those.
individuals would go to that other service.
Say that
knowing
again?
I said, yeah, that assumes that those people would go to the other service solely because of the administrative troubles.
Well,
Yeah.
arguably there were administrative troubles at community as well. And I don't want to get into an argument over it, but there were issues that caused the meltdown there as well. So the point here is we're moving forward collaboratively with representation on the board, and that board those board members are people from your town that have your town's interest at heart. Who decides to apply to become part of the field staff organization? None of us can address that. And on Tuesday, anybody that's a member of the field staff could decide that they don't want to work there anymore and leave. So we have to make an organization and an organizational plan based upon the number of people we need, and then see who wants to come and participate in that. And people can say, I'm not playing over there because, or they can come together and say, we're gonna serve both communities. That's an individual decision, and that could change with the wind. So we can't really plan around that. We have to plan around the number of bodies that we need. And we also have to both look at whatever transpired is behind us. And if you have seats on the board, you can deal with the management of the organization that exists. And if you don't like it, you petition to change it. So, we can throw that rock in both directions.
So, and this is Amy St. I just want to just iterate to the virtual audience, citizen comments were closed, but I'm happy if we do it in an orderly fashion from this point. If you just put a comment or say you want to speak in the chat, I absolutely will acknowledge you. But please just no shouting out, because actually I didn't even hear what you said, Josh. So if you type it in the chat, I will absolutely acknowledge anybody in the virtual audience, please.
And Amy, if I make it,
Go ahead, Bob, sorry.
can I address a little bit more of Brian's original question?
Yes, please, absolutely.
Okay. Could you create an entirely new entity? You could. The issue there is that you would need to go through all the things we talked about. You need to start an organization. You need to get a 501c3 if it's going to be a nonprofit organization. You then have to apply with the support of both organizations in both towns in order to do that. You then have to start over with applying for Medicare and Medicaid numbers as a new service, assuming that that's approved. And Judy, correct me, but the last time two entities got together to put a third service up was when Stamford and Greenwich merged together to put Access up.
Mhm.
And if I believe correctly, that was an 18-month legal battle because
Oh, yeah.
everybody around them fought the creation of a new service, even though it was supported by the two services that provided 911 in that community.
Yeah, it was all of that time frame, absolutely.
And hundreds of thousands of dollars of legal fees. Can
But
you
they
do
had
it?
the money to spend. That's the big
They
thing.
did.
and I'm not sure your town
The
wants to
lawyers
do
were
that.
very happy.
Yeah.
So can you do it physically? Yes. Will it take a much longer period of time, including having to then, before you start operation, then you also have to apply to Medicare and Medicaid as a new service to get set up for billing. There's a lot of moving parts, a whole lot more than trying to figure out a good way to work with your neighbors and working out logistics of control.
And Bob, there's nothing that says 2 years down the road with board approval that a name change can't happen.
Name change is easy.
Right.
Could happen.
It's more complicated than you think, from what I
I don't
understand.
think
because of
I don't think it
Medicaid
can
and
happen right out of the gate because
And
they've
the
got to
billing,
change their
yes.
501c3, they've got to
It's
change
all
their
paper.
Medicare, Medicaid. But it is if you plan it out properly, it can happen
It's
over
very
time,
specific.
Yeah.
right? Right?
It-
Somebody,
But if it's the same entity and they're just changing the name, that's paperwork.
So, I was under the impression that Thompson could not have their own department as an EMS, and now I'm hearing that you can. And you're also talking about a 503 nonprofit, 503c. I'm assuming it's a lot less complicated to have your own department of the town become the EMS as opposed to having a nonprofit to start or organize a nonprofit.
You take the IRS approval process out of it, but then you add in the hearing process and the budgetary setup and whatever approval process through Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, any ordinance. I don't know what your requirements are. And then from that point, you then have to take a look at the budget and figure out, as we talked about 2 weeks ago, is that going to be now, are we now talking about, a unionized department? I don't know the structure of some of your town departments. Does that change benefit structure? Does it, and increase that price point? To be determined. But it's easier in your particular case to do it as a town department because you already own some of the assets and you don't have to set up a 501c3 corporation. But there's a lot of other things that come with it down the road that may make it more costly to do it that way. That's to be determined.
Some of the costs that you have in the budget, I think that we are already paying for, like the insurance on the vehicles, and I see there's, some rent in there and things like that. Some of the parts of the budget we are already paying for, just to point out to you that I don't know that the budget that Bob, I think that it's not as costly as it appears to us, because it is costly, but we're already paying for parts of that.
But it's still a cost that has to be
Right.
identified.
Still has to be addressed.
And I
in
think the
some
biggest
way.
cost in all of this is the labor, right? We can't say that we're gonna start the department, all of our fixed costs are this, but our labor value, we're not gonna pay 19, we're gonna decide to pay 17 here in Thompson to drop our labor number down. But then we have a hard time getting staff because some other ambulance service is paying Putnam EMS goes to $17.50, $18, $19, Putnam goes to $19. I get it, right? There may be people who don't want to go and work for $19 at Putnam with the administration staff and the bosses and whatever supervisors are over there. But are they going to come and work for $17 here? Or are they going to go work for KB for $17 or Webster or Dudley or some other service?
Did we lose Judy?
Yeah, she did.
She had
She had to go to another meeting.
Market's gonna drive the week.
So Bob, another thing that, to build off of what Suzanne was saying is that either way, right now, we have no public safety facility. We are going to have to compensate Thompson Hill for housing the ambulance that has been there because we haven't worked out that deal yet. But certainly, at least for the first 6 months or even 8 months until we get a public safety facility, some of these costs might not completely come into play at the level that you're proposing. So I'm wondering how we're going to address that in that first year, as we're waiting for the public safety facility to be completed, as we're still just utilizing a bay in Thompson Hill Fire Department. So technically, the first year's cost is probably not going to be quite as high as projected because we won't have that overhead cost.
Well, he did put in
Right.
there a rent expense of 10,000.
Right. Which you're thinking for maybe Thompson Hill.
Yeah, I
but-
mean, he's
Right.
already got that in
But you
there.
also got fuel, oil maintenance,
Right,
things
and
like
that,
that.
and some of that stuff can be worked.
telephone utilities isn't going to be quite as high until we get that safety facility up and running.
No, but
They
you're
just-
paying, but,
You're gonna pay for that in the contract
Right.
service until then.
yeah, you're paying Putnam EMS to do that. You ain't gonna be paying, two separate, you're
But
combining.
this should be
It'd just be one
including
bill.
2 buildings. This quote that you gave us should be considering factoring in 2 buildings, not just one,
Is that correct?
correct?
Bob, how'd you figure that in?
What
Two
are we
bills.
talking? Give me the question again. I heard you talking, but it wasn't.
Under the combined services, there will be 2 buildings.
Well, Putnam already has one.
Right, and we'll have ours hopefully late
It's
summer.
either a building or renting somewhere in order to
Right.
to have the service up and operating.
Right. And the question was, as you're building the public safety building, is that going to be a donated as an in-kind service with the bay access for the vehicle if it's Putnam EMS providing the service? Or are you going to charge them a rental fee for the operational cost that has to be factored into the budget?
Oh, so those are things we'd have to- Okay.
You want to look at what Putnam's doing, treat it. In a
Similarly.
partnership, treat it similarly.
I think that's why it's listed in there, because he had it listed in there.
Got it. One other thing that I wasn't clear on, and I can't remember the exact term that Bob used but it had to do with resurrecting community, or what was that term?
Reconstituted.
What did you mean by that?
community
They get the
comes back.
PSA back.
Well, at this point,
Back to business.
right, at this point, and I verified this with Judy, They have relinquished the PSA, which means they would need to go back and reapply for that, which is a need for service process. Even, and I said to them, I said to Judy, could they just, renege on the letter, pull it back and say, no, we changed our mind. And the answer is no. Once it's been
So that's.
relinquished, you start the process. What has not been relinquished is the certificate of operation. So community fire is still in business. The certificate of operation for the ambulances still exists. So going back and reconstituting, as the term I used, and putting it back in business, if that was something you wanted to do, could be done. But you need to apply for the PSA. So you still have an interim period going through the need for service process, but it should be a whole lot easier to say I want my PSA back than I want, I'm expanding my service and what have you. Doesn't mean it's going to be really easy. It just means it's going to be easier because they already had it. But then you have to go back to, okay, is Community Fire's board of directors interested in getting back into the ambulance business? And if they're not, then it doesn't matter because we're in need for service for whoever that is going to move into the next level. So if Community Fire said, yeah, we'll go back in the ambulance business and under these terms and your terms, then you have the need for service to get the PSA back and you can start operations. And then you got to sell the ambulances back. So it is an option, but I know there was some discussion about whether that was something anybody was interested in. But I have to put it on the table as a consultant because it's an option.
What did Judy give you for a time frame to get the PSA back?
Still a need for service. Same thing we talked about. The only difference is it would be very difficult for anybody to object for the pre-existing holder to reclaim it. What the state's going to want to say is, okay, we give it back to you and we let you back starting operation. What's to say we're not going to be, what guarantees do we have that people aren't going to walk away again? So that's going to be a well thought out plan with, funding in place and all the rest of it to say, we're here, we have people, we have all the rest of it to prove to the state that they're not giving it back and only going to have to take it away again or have it reneged again.
Hey, Bob, with your experience, sharing the services with them, how much oversight does OEMS look at as service that's coming together for the first time that everything is going well? Do they do anything?
They don't.
Or
They
it'd be up to
work.
us?
Everything at OEMS works. Once the certificate of operation and the service has been approved for operation, everything from that point forward operates off of either a municipality asking for something to happen and asking for a review, or complaints. Large numbers of complaints, if they are substantiated complaints, generates action at the state level. If somebody is saying that they're not making their calls, and I will tell you that we had a service in another part of the state that was missing 40% of their first calls, which is, by having a PSA, you obligate yourself to take the first call out. And that's when the state stepped in and said, you either need to fix this or we're going to take your PSA away and we're going to put your service out of its misery. But they are not saying, okay, we got a new provider, we're going to start inspecting it and coming down and everything else. Once you prove that you can do it, it's up to the municipality to say, yes, they are, no, they're not, or they operate off of public or internal staffing complaints.
And as a town, Bob, as a town, we have access to QV to get any of the calls.
It's public record. Oh, yeah, that's public
We
record.
can get that and monitor it.
Absolutely.
To see from time of the call to response and on scene.
Yep. As a matter of fact, what should happen, and again, if we're writing a contract or helping you write a contract, there's a couple of provisions in there. One of them is a reporting provision that says that the provider will, on a monthly basis, provide the report that has these parameters to it. And then you have every capability of going back and saying, okay, give me the report and see if they match. But that's public information. You can get it.
Just that we have to be on the proactive side and hold the service to the quality that we expect. The service.
Well, you all do, but Amy really does.
No, but I mean, as a town, we
Yes.
have that.
No, I mean, you all do because you're all ultimately responsible under Section 7 for providing the ambulance service and choosing the provider and setting up whatever the system's going to be. The test for that is if it fails is either going to be complaints or a call with a bad outcome, and people are going to start looking and saying, okay, well, what happened and why? So ultimately, the Board of Selectmen and Amy as first selectman is going to be the, where the lawyers are going to be looking if the system fails to meet its obligations under the PSA requirements, which is have an ambulance available for the first call.
I was just gonna add, Amy, Rob Wirch again. To me, when I stack up the three options, the full outsource model is by far the most expensive, probably by 2x. It's got a lot of benefits in terms of what you can do and get in and get out of it and move to somebody else. And if you don't like the team you're with, a lot of flexibility and benefits. It's path of least resistance in terms of getting it started. We can get it started right now. As a matter of fact, we're doing it right now, but it's very, very costly. I think about the other two models and the whole discussion tonight. It's really losing the control of a full-blown in-town model for the benefit of a lower cost model. Assuming the services are the same in both, which they should be. Is having that full control of having it within our town worth that added cost? We want to pay that much for those services. If we do, then you'd want to go down that path. We feel like we're going to get as good, the same quality of service in a combined model that costs us less. Why would we not go down a model that's a lower cost model if we're not sacrificing or giving up? We are giving up
Because
control,
that's
but we're not
the
giving up
question.
service.
Are we getting equal service? Are we gonna get the service that are we gonna be able to provide the safety and the service with this combined model?
Sounds like it might be
We should.
more service in terms of the coverage.
With the peak.
You got the peak vehicle that's out there.
More than we've got right
We're also
now.
not considering the income from the city. Throw that
But-
into the factor because that's,
But if there is,
if,
I'm
I,
just trying to bring it back.
Yeah, no, I agree.
no, you're right, but if you put in the speedway after, that would be operated by Putnam EMS, which means they crew it, they do truck, and whatever profit hopefully is gonna offset our contribution going in and possibly bring it down further.
Our budgeted contribution to the annual 190,000.
And what happens if,
why would they look at it that way?
Well, it
Because
depends.
we
That's
put it-
them
Because we
budgeting with,
contract it that way. That's the thing that
The
we,
contract hasn't been worked out yet.
that's the rub in this entire discussion. We haven't gone through the contract. Bob's recommendation in the report suggested one board member as part of the contract. It didn't dictate that it was one, right? We haven't gotten that far yet. It could be 4. It could be 2. It could be whatever it could be. And we can put in that contract that whatever revenues come from the Speedway are specifically tied to the Thompson contribution to the overall project.
It's a lot to discuss when you negotiate the contract. A lot of details, without a doubt. Unfortunately, I lost my train. There's a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
But the flexibility, the peak vehicle, 24/7 coverage is very appealing. Especially with the, every fire department, every EMS, the guys that are going out, we're strong at night, we're weak during the day. Even at night, they can be weak because people are working multiple shifts and different things. The hours that go in for firefighter 1, 2, 3 and fire officer are horrendous. Never mind the 100+ something hours just to be an EMT and keep up that certification. Just to research an EMT right now is 40 hours. And it's every 2 years.
and I think the other thing that we're not discussing is the fact that once it leaves the Board of Selectmen every year, it has to go to the Board of Finance. So if the Board of Finance says, well, give me options, and we say, well, if we contract it out, it's gonna be 190,000. If we do it ourselves, it's closer to 300,000. So they'll probably say, well, if you want to do it yourself, that's fine, but we're going to give you 190,000. How are you going to be able to do it with that? We know
That's
how
where
the
you
budget
lose
season
total
is.
control, because when Putnam puts together a budget and says Thompson's contribution is 250,000 this year. You-
But it's,
No.
I remember what my train of thought was. It was talking about our representation on the board. If Putnam doesn't have any, town of Putnam has no representation on the board, I would think us coming on, they're gonna want their representation on the board as well.
The town of Thompson, not just.
The town of Putnam and the town of Thompson.
Putnam and Thompson.
Yeah,
Right,
they're gonna
correct.
want a seat at the table as well. I'll guarantee it.
And I think drawing up what that organizational structure is going to look like, drawing up a draft of the contract as Thompson would propose it, I think is the only way to really understand where we're going to go going forward. Is, we might say, hey, we want 3 people on the board. Putnam might say, hey, we want 3 people on the board. And then Putnam EMS as the entity gets 1, or the board expands to have 3 of theirs. So it's a 9-person board, right?
Just like we split up the whole Sportsville.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but there's nothing that says that we can't get down that road with negotiations on that from that aspect. I understand entirely that there are concerns from a management perspective throughout the EMS system in Northeast Connecticut. You go anywhere, listen, I don't like my boss every day at my job, right? I'm sure there are people who don't like their boss every day at their job. I think I don't think that is the biggest concern long-term. I think the biggest concern long-term is what's going to best benefit the townspeople of both Thompson and Putnam. And I think that if there is management challenges, which we've seen in the past in Thompson, that those can be worked through from a board structure, from a contract structure level that we have not had control of in the past, right? The town of Thompson did not have that kind of control over Community Fire Company. The town of Thompson doesn't even have that kind of control over KB Ambulance right now. The only control the town of Thompson has over KB Ambulance is if they don't like them, they stop paying them. Well, they stop paying them, we don't get service. So, there's this entire discussion that we have to have. And I would be more than willing, and I think it might be an opportunity to hear it out, is to actually have a public forum where we're all sitting down and we find out if there are concerns from the former EMS, that they come in and have those concerns expressed. Be it even if they want to express it in writing to the first selectman in this process. So.
I like the idea of not
Yeah,
being
but it's
worried
not-
about
Still got a little bit.
hiring,
know.
managing the staffing and everything, and having that organization do it, and we hold them accountable for our needs. Because that's more stuff that's on us.
Well, and Ken, there's nothing that says that our HR person, because I don't think that Putnam EMS necessarily has an HR person. I think it's handled ad hoc. I don't think they have an HR. So there's nothing that says that part of our contribution can't be that our HR person handles the EMS HR, right? Bringing it into that town, not so much that town entity, but we have a professional HR person. Why can't that person, same way we're doing with the school, be the HR person for the EMS, for both towns?
I hate the fact that this has happened to the town, but I think it's an opportunity to provide better service, to be advocates for our EMTs and EMRs. And I know that we can kick the can down the road and not make a decision, but I feel strongly we need to make a decision. So I would make a motion that we move forward with pursuing the combined service with Putnam EMS. I made a motion. We have a second. Now we open up for
I would
discussion.
ask that we just hold this until our next meeting and make our final decision. I would like just a little bit more time to look at these numbers and
We've
even
had
have a
months,
discussion.
Suzanne, we've had months. I don't agree. I don't agree.
I don't like the road we're going down.
I know you don't.
I don't think this is,
You also have a vested interest. You might not be completely unbiased.
Amy, I'm
Suzanne?
offended that you're saying that to
I'm
me,
sorry.
but you're making a decision that is gonna last for a very long time in this town.
But we have had months to
One
think
more
about this.
week, No, we've had this report for 2 weeks. One more week until our next meeting,
What do you think will change?
maybe nothing. But I'd like to look at the numbers a little bit closer, a little
I thought
bit
you had a
more.
spreadsheet.
I do have a spreadsheet and it doesn't, these numbers don't make a lot of sense on the
I
spreadsheet.
wish you would have.
What we were paying for the 12-hour service.
We don't want a 12-hour
No,
service in
Amy,
town.
listen, but
We
what
don't
I'm
want a
saying to you,
12-hour
it
service.
doesn't, it didn't add up to the same numbers and show the same contributions that's, if this is what you want, this is not what I want, this is not, I'm
I don't know that I don't think,
disagreeing with the benefits to it, I understand, and maybe it's because the Putnam service does not have a good reputation. That I have some real concerns about the management of the operation. If we were starting with brand new boards and brand new people and brand new administration and everything was all shiny and new, that would be different. But we're starting with an organization that has had some speed bumps in the past.
Every organization has speed bumps. That's already been said going forward. Even if we create our own organization, we could have speed bumps in it as
But it's
well.
ours.
And, we'll have problems.
And now we're spending money, our town money out of town on the administration for Putnam. To me, I get what you're all saying. And I'm offended that you feel that it's an emotional tie for me. But in a
I'm
sense,
sorry. if I
it is
offended
because
you.
I'm very emotional about the town of Thompson and I'm very committed to the safety of this town and doing the right thing. That's why I sit on the Board of Selectmen. That is why I sat on the Board of Finance, because when I make a big decision like this, I want to know that I have opened every door and looked down every hallway and made sure that I have as much accurate information as I can. And if it means another week to me, that's another week. It's not going to change a whole heck of a lot in another week. And if you want to vote on it now, that's fine.
I think we should, continue to explore this thing, get into the weeds and turn the stones and see where this all shakes out. Cost, staffing, the benefits, all those numbers.
But we won't know those numbers
No,
until we
but-
actually move
Something
forward
that-
with one
Right,
plan.
and we haven't
could
signed
move
anything.
forward. We could move forward with pursuing something and then, now we're really extending the time, but apparently we got 6 months anyways.
You still got Putnam involved in this
We
as well.
still have to work on the contract and then maybe the contract doesn't come out like we want it to be,
And
but
Putnam may see,
but to not move forward.
but the
with
town of
something.
Putnam may not see it the same way we are, and it creates a problem. We don't know.
And then you're back to the drawing
There's
board.
three.
You have to start
Exactly.
somewhere.
Right, you got,
We've got to start someplace.
I agree.
And we won't have all the numbers until we start working on the logistics. And even then, the first year is almost a trial. And Bob, correct me if I'm completely wrong, but at one point I had a conversation with Jamie and we talked that potentially maybe the peak crew with the combined service might not even be needed. Do you think that could be an option? Like, once we get up and running, that maybe with the two services backing, the two towns backing one
Actually,
another?
Want me to specify?
Yeah, you
What I said is with the two ambulances on 24/7, you could fine tune that peak crew based on the unavailability of both those ambulances.
Okay.
So if you take both those ambulances, how many times were both those ambulances on calls? So you're gonna backfill the second call with the second ambulance, so if Putnam has a call, another call comes in, Thompson ambulance takes it, vice versa. And how much of that time frame, are both those ambulances out of service where maybe we only need 4 hours of peak ambulance time for that third ambulance versus 8 hours? And which essentially, we're talking over $200,000 for that peak ambulance crew. You could drop that down to $100,000 if you do that 3 month assessment.
And if you remember at the meeting 2 weeks ago, I said to you, right now, these are the peak times. That needs to be something that you look at monthly, make adjustments quarterly, based on that truck. But that might not be a 12-hour truck. Matter of fact, the budget, I believe, is built on a 10-hour truck. It could actually be a 6 or an 8-hour truck. So it is a fluid piece. That's the reason it's called a peak truck, is because you put it on when you need it to cover the majority of the calls based on the timing. I also had said to you that if you had people that came back and wanted to be volunteers for either of the, for the organization, or if you are standing alone for either organization, that also saves on labor costs. Can you guarantee it? No. We're building this to guarantee a truck 24/7, and we're looking at the last 3 years of data and as to when a third ambulance in the system would make some sense. But it's a fluid process for that third ambulance.
Well, I think either model, I think the idea of volunteers coming back is probably out the door. No, nobody anymore in the EMS system is coming back to do it for free.
I think,
Not in Thompson.
No.
I think as part of this discussion moving forward, I think a realistic on paper pros and cons list versus creating our own service versus a combined with Putnam, I really think needs to just be exposed. What are the benefits? What are the pros and what are the cons? And I think there are some legitimate concerns to the consolidated model with Putnam. But I don't think that those are not able to be worked out. I really think that that's something that can change.
It's not insurmountable.
Right. I think what can't change is if we were to waste, if we were just to tell Putnam at this point, thanks, but no thanks, we're out. I think that would just be the ultimate in just being rude. I think we at least owe the contract negotiations and see where that goes. And if that fails, well, then we know
There was a motion on the floor.
the prenup.
I know, we're still discussing it.
Well,
Oh, I know. I've invited the 3 people that have been,
I know, but
Actively
I'm just saying the Board of Selectmen have a motion on the floor, so usually that's just Board of Selectmen discussion. And I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want to make sure we're doing this the right way.
I don't want to push this off.
I agree.
Sorry.
This
This has
affects,
been months.
it affects us, it affects Putnam, it affects Putnam EMS, because we're all going into budget seasons very shortly.
And it will affect KB. KB Ambulance has been,
Everything.
they've put their neck out there and they've been helping us for months now. And I just, and I know it's been a stretch for them. And I can't express my appreciation to KB Ambulance enough. And I don't want to leave them hanging. I don't,
Well, they've done a great job. We've got the 24/7 coverage. It's worked out very well.
they have,
Thompson Hill supplying the space,
yes.
even when community was there, taking on KB, allowing that to happen there is tremendous on their part. It's been a godsend. And obviously, whatever compensation that we need to address with that can be done, for the use of that location as well. But I see the bigger picture, going down with this, that if this all happens, I see Woodstock, possibly in the future coming into this and having a whole bigger shared ambulance service with one entity operating it, which takes the relief off of the towns. And we all sit on the board and,
And I see it as
oversee
an
it.
opportunity to blaze a trail, something that been out there. All of the services that I've talked to from Mansfield, the Mortlake area, I think I spoke to someone, Mortlake has their own ambulance, right? And, they've all expressed the same concerns. I think Mortlake uses Vintech, right? Is that correct?
but,
Yeah, I
but
believe
this
it's
all,
colored.
Yeah.
again, this all comes back to the trend that's going on nationally with the small rural towns, sharing of the services in order to make them stronger. That's why NECOG we did a couple of studies over several years, Bob. That wasn't the first one because we've done the paramedic intercept and talked about this thing, and back then when we did it in 18, the whole thing was to keep your current service up and running as best as you can, feasibly, because that was your best bang for the buck. But at some point, it was going to break. And to go back on it right now is not gonna happen. So we have to look to the future.
Comment or should I wait?
Um,
Maybe? Comment after you vote?
You can make a
My,
comment.
my one comment that we kind of touched on and I wanted to bring back around is that we, as a town, do decide to go down this path. And there is a lot of details and negotiation and things to happen. I think there was about a 45-day window where we could have an interim agreement. And if we went down that path, now we get an opportunity to work together while we're designing and creating the future model. That's kind of a nice thing to have, right?
Yeah, we get a good look, see at how it's working.
For several months.
And according to what Judy and Bob have said, they've already applied for that extra vehicle, correct, Bob?
If they have not applied, I know the application is complete. I don't know if it's been submitted.
So, right, so they're already they're already looking to raise, you know, the service to add a third vehicle.
No, I just wanted to restate that. I think we have an opportunity while we're working with a new partner to have an interim contract.
Yeah.
So we have a motion on the floor.
Can you reiterate the motion?
Motion would be to move forward with pursuing a contract contract negotiations with, I'm looking for the correct
Putnam
terminology,
EMS.
Putnam EMS, but
As a combined,
who had a specific, hold on,
well, I don't know what Dottie ordered it.
okay. Well, Putnam EMS, I'll make my motion was to move forward with pursuing contract negotiations with Putnam EMS to expand coverage to both towns. That's. And Ken seconded. Before I move on, I mean, I do want to apologize to my fellow selectmen. I was out of line, and I hope you'll forgive
Of course,
me being out
of
of line.
course, we're a team.
It's emotions, it's a little bit of emotions for me. It's been a long few months, and having this dropped on my lap was certainly not something I wanted. And I've learned a heck of a lot about ambulance service, more than I cared to know, and additionally, it's very complicated. And it's a tough business. And what I want more than anything is just honestly to be an advocate for our EMTs in Thompson and Putnam. And that's why I just want to move forward.
And
with
we
this
need to
option.
provide that service to our residents.
And I want good service. I want 24/7 service. I want the very best service for our residents.
I want what's needed. I'm not saying 24/7 is needed. I'm not saying it's not needed. I want an emotional, as far as what this town needs and the people, these are my neighbors, these are my relatives, these are my friends, these are my coworkers, whatever. I want to know when I go to bed at night that we've done the right thing. I don't feel this is the right thing to do. That's, and I, you know, we all share opinions. I respect your opinion. I respect your opinion. I don't think this is the right road to go down.
And my feeling is 24/7 is necessary. Because
And I respect
at
that.
the non-peak hours, when my father has a heart attack, if he lived in Thompson, I want someone there responding. I don't want to be someone who's stipend or someone who's volunteering. I just believe, and I think the taxpayers believe in, we know that they support our EMS. They support our fire
They do.
departments without qualms. And if it raises their mill rate, they're going to be okay with that, because they believe in this
It's
service.
not about that. That's where,
Oh, I
that's
know.
what I'm trying to say is, it is about the safety of the residents in the town of Thompson and having that support, having that service, that quality service, quality. That's where I'm at. I get it. It's gonna cost us more money. It's gonna raise mill rates, and people are not gonna like that part of it, but they will respect it. But I'm talking about the quality of the service that's provided. That's a big part of where I'm coming from.
And I hope that the staff that worked in Thompson before will come on board with us for the good of Thompson because they are good and they are the best at what they do.
Well, we have not
And we haven't negotiated
contracted
yet.
with
Right.
Putnam.
Right.
So we won't know that. It may
So
not
those
work out.
details are worked out.
So,
Right.
but I'm not in favor of this. One more time, I'm gonna say it, that I don't think this is the right thing to do, and I don't think that we've exhausted all our avenues either. When a new one was brought up tonight that we never even knew we could consider is resurrecting community.
That was talked about previously.
I
It
don't
was.
think
Bob had talked about it.
I don't think I understood that clearly. I thought that was a dead horse. I don't think I
It
understood
it
that.
has
until
its
it was-
challenges in order to resurrect it,
Mhm.
but it was always a possibility.
Did not know that. I thought once they gave up their PSA, they were done.
To clarify the point, they gave up their PSA. The community fire company still exists. The certificate of operation is still authorized. But because they gave up their PSA, they can't operate until they get that back, which requires a need for service. But the bigger issue is going to be would be your negotiations with community fire board of directors as to whether or not they want to get back into the ambulance business or not. So that's negotiation step one. Step two is, if so, what does that contract look like? Step three is need for service application to get the PSA back and a start date of operations based on, whatever the contract parameters or the agreement parameters are between you and community fire.
We've had Merrill and the board of directors here showing their concerns about the service. And even their president, Merrill, saying town of Thompson does not want to be in the ambulance business. He made that clear to the board. That was his opinion. But there's been a lot of stuff floated out.
Yeah. I I'm not trying to speak for them, but there was a clear discussion at the board level about not being in the ambulance business. So I don't know if that mindset has changed. That's between you two, you and the fire company.
All right, any further discussion? With that, I will call for a vote on this motion. All in favor of the motion as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed
Opposed.
or?
Nay.
Dottie, on the minutes, you'll have to record the names of who voted. Yeah, because it wasn't unanimous. Yeah, that concludes the meeting. I make a motion that we adjourn,
Second.
7:25 PM. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
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 Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome. Look forward to next steps with everybody.